Good day and welcome to the Strong Ambition Podcast. I'm your host, Rhyland, and I am here to dive into what makes people ambitious and live a more ambitious life. And we're going to continue where we left off at the last episode. If you didn't catch the last episode, please go right back and listen to that. Whiskey and Barbells, part one with AJ. And this is part two. So you're going to want a little context, although we do really explore new conversations in this. And we hit a whole bunch more, especially around the preconceived notions and mistakes that people make in training. And so I think you'll really enjoy it. So this was, again, as I had mentioned last week, just us really talking about our passion. And I wanted to really explore the new ideas I had learned and find out what he had learned. And then we talk about, future ideas. What is he taking forward? He's always going towards new things, especially in the realm of psychology, which is really fascinating. So it's a great conversation, despite how many whiskeys and how long it went. I'm more than willing to bet you're going to enjoy it. So without further ado, here is part two of Whiskey and Barbell. So I had an idea. So just because the way that was flowing, you had a really good discussion there, and the idea of motivation is so important. And if people only have a surface motivation, it's just so going to fail. It has to be something so much bigger than aesthetics. Even aesthetics, you have to ask, like, why do the aesthetics matter or anything like that? And so I came up with this, and it's not perfect. It's just my whole system, because when you hear people talk about motivation and why they're motivated, I look at all three and I say you should use all three, and it's pain, it's purpose or pride, and perception. And so the pain is what is the issue that's making you uncomfortable in life? Like, why are you trying to create something that's like going to make a better you because you have pain emotionally or physically that's going to change you? So you recognize that pain, and that's okay. Like, I hate being fat, or I hate being weak, I hate being small. Knowing, like, that's good. That's there because it's going to be part of the fire. You have many things that are going to go into the fire. You don't have a fire running off of one log. Many logs are stoking your fire. And then purpose and pride is like, okay, who do you want to be? Like, who is this future version? Like, something that's going to be like, so like, oh man, that gets me fired up. Like, being this other person, this alternative you, is that purpose and pride. And I want to be this person. And then the perception to me is, who does it matter to you? Like, why does like you being this person affect your world? And so and I don't try to say it's like care what people think. Care about your people, care about the people that are close to you. But with all three of those, you should find a why. And if you can't find those why, and like, honestly, when I talk to people trying to like get them motivated and stuff, it's like, if you don't have any of those three, or if they're kind of vague, I just see those people not do well because it's not enough. And like you say, a heart attack, like my dad's full on told me many times, he's like, yeah, I'm just waiting for the big one. Then either I go or I really got to check my shit. And I'm just like, what an approch. I mean, you're not wrong, but what a fucking approach.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, yeah, it's kind of tough, right? Like, I don't know why, but we all do it to ourselves in our own way, right? Like, some people might be through like health and fitness where they put it off and procrastinate and know they should do, and other, so I'll easily try to eat good. I'll easily go to the gym every single day. I'll easily train all the time. It's like built into my DNA at this point. Like, I have to do it, right? I could give you a list of things that I don't do that I know I should be doing, right? So we all have things. So I mean, it all comes kind of from the same place, right? Like, I don't want to sit there and judge someone for not getting to the gym every day. Even though I go to the gym every day, because there's probably something that person's doing every single day that I'm not, that I know I should be doing. You know what I mean? There's there's plenty of things that I feel that we all kind of procrastinate on, or that we know we should be doing that that we just don't do, you know. And sometimes, you know, I do believe that sometimes the action precedes the motivation, you know, to go. So sometimes it does take a few times, like, if someone's waiting for motivation to go to the gym, it might not ever come to the degree that actually gets them to get up off the couch and go, right? If you can go 1 or 2 times without motivation, you know, without being motivated to go, maybe you get a buddy or a training partner, you've hired yourself a trainer, you've done something where you have someone else in there kind of like encouraging you to go and do it. And then you go a few times, then sometimes all of a sudden that person's own motivation starts picking up, right? Now they've gone a few times. Now maybe it's not such a scary place to go. Maybe they got a certain level of comfort now. Maybe they've met you and talked to you and really like you, and they're like, I trust Rhyland. You know what I mean? Like, I'm still not crazy about going to the gym, but I really like this guy, so I'm gonna go see him. You know what I mean? Like, and then after he sees you for a month and he gets a little bit of return on his investment, now maybe his own personal motivation starts picking up, because now you've helped, help him realize a little bit of belief in himself and that this can work, or that he can do this, right? So sometimes, at the same time, I do feel that the action sometimes does precede the motivation to do something, right? Like it. And if we wait around for the motivation, sometimes it never comes strong enough that it actually makes us to act on it, right?
Well stated. Very well stated. I think so. This is something I heard before. I hate to use this on a podcast, but it was this idea that I've heard many people talk about it. Like, you have to appreciate that at a certain point, motivation won't be there. And it is kind of describing what you're saying. The way I look at it, though, is from the whole order of operations. The only way for someone to make a change is they have to determine a form of motivation to light the fire. Once they've lit that fire, that's great. But this is where what you're talking about, I think, has the application. And I describe it as momentum, inspiration, motivation. And this is what I got from it. And the guy had said that you have to appreciate that once you get momentum, and you're going to be like, oh, hey, I have momentum. And then it's working because you have the momentum and you feel inspired that you're doing something in the right order. And then you get motivation from that. But the other thing is, the way that I really like to look at it in the habit behavior. And there's another thing I really talk to my clients about is, there's going to be this little hump. And I got this from looking at the habit loop. I think I can't, one of the habit books, there's so many habit books, but one of the habit books had the habit loop, which was cue, routine, reward, right? And so I kind of broke it down to, you got to get to this point. Oh, you got to get ice. You got to get ice.
Yeah, keep going though. Keep going. I'm listening. I got it turned on.
Yeah. So you get to this point where you have motivation, and you got to get over this hump that exists where you have motivation. I'm going to start doing it. I'm going to the gym. I did a couple of sessions. Oh man, this is tough. This is tough. You have to get, and I like the loop, literally the circle, because there's this point where you feel like the shit you're doing is tough and you're not getting results yet. And so the literal circle, I think, is like a good analogy for people, because it's like, I'm going to do something. I'm going to do something great. And then you get going, and then it's like, fuck, nothing's happening. This sucks. This is tough. And then you get, as soon as you get over this hump, you're like, wait, I can do more push-ups. I feel better. I sleep better. You have to get over that hump. And then you're back at the bottom in terms of, okay, I feel motivated. Let's do this again. But again, the hump's going to come again. There's going to be another little hump. You're going to have to get over another sticking point. And
right.
I heard a guy say it well, and he said, it was actually Kevin Stock. He was the guy who was really good, ironically, a carnivore advocate guy that I
Okay.
got a lot of his whole model from. And he had said, you will fall to the level of your systems, not to the level of your motivation.
Right.
Because if your system says I show up no matter what, it'll work. But if you say I only show up when I'm motivated, it will falter. Like, it's not even a question. Like, you're guaranteed to have days that you don't show up because you're not motivated. And like you had said, when it comes to you and I with training and concerning ourselves with training and strength, it is so not a problem anymore. It is so much embedded in our identity.
Right.
There's not even a motivation. Like, there's too much there. If anything, it's a distraction from other things. We get so much from it. We don't need to worry about it. But then tell us to go do yoga. Go, hey, do you want to do an extra half-hour mobility session?
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to go do like books? You want to go do your books for the taxes for the year? Like, these are things that make us uncomfortable, that we're like, I'm just trying to call out what I know for myself, probably similar to yourself, where you're like, all right, I should do it, but that makes me uncomfortable. And so one of the things that even just, I try to use a lot of my examples from me owning my own business in terms of, because I own my own business and everyone owns their own fitness. And so there's many times where I could do nothing, but I lean into that, like, I'm tired. Go into it. You have to fight that feeling and that voice and that signal. Okay, you definitely should keep going, because that's exactly what you want to be able to overcome. And that is like that's where you get your momentum instinct from. And it's been really cool that it's worked. That, like, I rarely hang up the hat before 8:30. Now, I have a privilege of taking a break midday, and I work out exactly when I want to, so I hang up the hat late. But the cool thing is that the instinct of quitting has been there, and I learned to lean into it, and it still comes, and I still recognize it as, oh, that's that signal that I have to go against. And so, I just want to say that example because, I'm not just talking the talk, because it's easy for us to talk about the training, but I do this in my real life. You certainly do in your real life. Like, this is what makes us better in our profession. It empowers us, because I love the term resistance training better than strength training. Honestly, I think a part of me does, because it's the resistance to the external world that you have to enforce. And that's why I say strength training or resistance training trains your mind more than anything else.
That's right. Oh, 100%. Yeah. There's a huge mental component to it, right? But yeah, I think, like you said, there's a whole bunch of habit books out there and worded a whole bunch, but they're all kind of, at the end of the day, saying the same thing. I know David Goggins was big on the thing too. He's always preaching that your motivation won't always be there. It's going to come and go, but you just get your body in that state of just being like, this is what we do. You know what I mean? So like, the alarm goes off in the morning and your motivation might not be there to get out of bed that day and go for your run or go to the gym or go do whatever you need to do. But you now just train your body to understand that whether the motivation there is, whether it's there or not, it doesn't matter. Like, this is just what we do. Do it every single day, and we do it all the time, and this is what we do, right? And but that's having structure, right? That's bringing structure into it. And like you're saying, you're going to fall to the level of your plan or your structure or your training or whatever. You've seen that kind of thought process or that saying kind of applied to a bunch of different areas, whether it's training or nutrition, or I've seen it used in sports a lot, right? Like, obviously I come from a big football background, and football was huge on repetition, rep. We could run the simplest play. We could run a simple dive play or a simple lead or whatever. And we literally practice it every single practice, every single week, every single month, every single year. I'd be on the same team. I'd be at, whether it's in university or high school or playing community before, I'd have the same coach. We'd run the same play to death like a million times over. We'd rep it out against nobody. Then we'd rep it out against the defense, and we'd rep it out against, whatever, like just the DBs and linebackers. And we bring the D line and rep it out against them added in. And then we'd run at full speed against the second string defense. And then we'd run it, like, you know what I mean? And then we'd watch film on it. And it was that same idea, right? Like in the game, you're going to face adversity and you're going to face the elements. It might be windy out. It might be cold out. It might be, terribly hot out. It might be raining. You might be sore. You might be beat up. It's the fourth quarter. You're tired. You're run down. You're exhausted. You've played almost a full game in those moments. And now we're going to fall to the level of our training or a level of our preparation. Now we go to run that lead play. We've run it a million times in every scenario imaginable, in every way we could possibly construct it. And so it doesn't matter that it's snowing or raining or plus 50 out and we're dying of heat exhaustion or anything like that. It doesn't matter if we're playing a good team, a bad team, or whatever. We've run it so many times that all those factors aren't going to affect us because we're just going to fall right back to the level of our training. And our level of training is we rep the shit out of this play a million times. Like we are masters at running this play, And so I've seen that like kind of thought process or analogy kind of applied to a whole bunch of different scenarios, and it works, right? People use it because it works.
It totally works. It's like it's the foundation of professional, like professional teams. It's really fascinating you brought that up because I totally utilize that so much with boxing athletes, and it's been really unfortunate because boxing didn't really utilize this strategy as much, in my opinion, from the experience that I had and have seen.
It doesn't?
What's that?
Boxing doesn't utilize that strategy?
Boxing scrimmages all the fucking time, and that's it. They tell you hit the bag. Oh, you know how to hit the bag. Go hit each other. That's it. There's no drills. I
feel like boxing would be the ultimate sport in that because it's like
100%.
We programmed this. Now you're getting punched in the face. It's okay. You're going to just follow the level of your training. Like, what to do no matter what external factors comes to you. We've trained you in this situation. Like boxing is the utmost, like you can't draw up a sport with more adversity to try to stay like fall back to your level of training and adversity than someone punching you in the head.
It's like I really preach this so much to my guys, my whole team, guys or girls, and I always say it's like boxing is reactive. Okay, you're not going to have a personal conversation with yourself on strategy when someone punches you in the face. It is so 100% what your instinct is within that moment. Let's create the best instincts for you within that moment. But what they actually do, like, I'm not saying I say my experience and what I've seen a lot of in boxing, and it's changing. Like, I'm not saying all gyms are like this, but I certainly believe that our gym became more of, in this city, more of a front runner on it. And in comparison to so many other martial arts, we are way fucking behind the ball on this because it's open sparring in like class training. You have classes and you have open sparring and you have hand pads. And so, and I'll fully say that there was some technical sparring when I started, but they didn't stay very long. And I still remember the one day when my coach was like, "Hey, nice block." I'm like, that was like a lucky instinct. Why didn't I get trained that? And so when I train my team and stuff like that, is like, you're going to have someone do the same thing to you again and again. I don't care if it's a fucking jab. You're doing it until it's instinct, and you're doing it in every single way that you need to. And that's like you say, it is so important that that's instinctive. The only time that you have as a boxer is like, you're at a distance. Okay, I'm going to start the confrontation or the exchange like this. I'm going to initiate it like this. And then from there, it's instinct. Okay,
Right.
how did those instincts that I had work out? That instinct either worked or didn't. You either hope that that instinct is going to work again, or you change it. And that's like, I hate to dumb down boxing to that, but that's kind of a lot of what it is. And it's terrible to see that people don't train within the exchange. You get hit, you need an instinct. Right. But, you know, and just to bring it back to lifestyle in general, like if people could appreciate that analogy, that when you get hit, you have a terrible instinct right now, right? Right. When you get hit in the face, if I were to just do that, you freak out. But right. If I could explain to you that if you did that, if I did that to you, you could not have that instinct no matter what. Right. And that'd be very empowering. And be like, oh, that'd be really cool. And if you could apply that principle to how you feel when you're tired, how you feel when you don't want to care about training, how you don't want to care about your nutrition, you could apply that to fucking anything. But it's like, this is why it's discipline over motivation. It's reps of will. And I remember we talked about that term years ago when we were in the gym. It's reps of will. It's this idea of the willingness to do things. Not, mental reps are more important than physical reps when it comes down to it, right?
Yeah. Man, that blows me away. Like, I cannot think of a sport where it would be more useful.
Right.
Be like so well trained that no matter the, you know what I mean? Like, just to rep it out. So in any situation, like, man, you've thrown your jabs so many times that you are just like programmed to, like, you know what I mean? Like,
right. So let me like dumb down my experience and also say where there is some in between. There's some in between. So they do reps of punching, right? Certain times of punching. Heavy bag work though is so limited to your ability to punch and where your punch should land. That's what it's limited to, is range, and it's good for conditioning. Right. Hand pad work is where people get a lot of their reaction skills from.
Okay.
But there's a problem here, is that the coach anticipates everything for you. So it's like, you'll get like, I know some people can't see this on the podcast, but you'll get a coach essentially telling you what the whole combination is, which isn't the problem. But the problem is, I love this. I always say it's like, a coach should go 90-10 or 10 of the 90, right? So the athlete should go 90% of the way of the punch, and the coach should go 10%. And I laugh at it because it's like Will Smith from Hitch, right? You go 90-10, right? And so, but that's really what it is. That's a perfect combination, because you need to push into the hand pad in order for the client to receive some contact. If you don't hold it, then it's not going to work. So you go like 90-10, maybe 80-20. But I see so many coaches doing 50% of the work, and their hands are like, not only the hands like not going all the way out, they're not even coming all the way back. The athlete's hands are staying halfway out and not even doing all the work. And they'll do things of like signaling. So like a big hook is like going over their head. It's like, no, aim for their fucking head. You make them do all the work. And the one thing that you definitely would have seen me do with like some of the guys doing boxing there, is I would do tit for tat. And that was, I'm going to slap you on your guard and you're going to hit back with this side. So if you remember seeing me just smacking the guys with the hand pads, do you remember seeing that? And that was exactly what we're talking about. I said, if you get hit here, you hit back twice with these two. You get hit here, you do that. And we would do it until it was just exactly how you said. You don't think about it. You get in your groove, you just respond, boom, 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 boom. And you get into a flow state, which should be essentially, Chris said he remember seeing guys get slapped. And that's exactly what it was. You were just like getting that reaction. And it's so important to have the reaction. But here's the other problem. That's a coach with hand pads. That is not a human standing in front of you throwing punches. That is still an in-between. Like, there's shadow boxing, there's heavy bag work, there is hand pad work, and we're getting closer, but we need another human in front of us. And so
Right.
I will say that our gym does a really good job, and I really try to orchestrate this. You need some drills that are random, but you need a lot of drills that are standardized and that are very rudimentary, that are just do this fucking thing until you're good at it. And I would say that not all boxing is like this. I would say the boxing culture that I've experienced and I've seen is more like, you know, coming from hitting the bag to getting into sparring and not having tools. I would say that quite a few gyms in North America are more like that. I don't know how it is across the world. I feel like the Soviet standard is a bit different because we have a guy from Kazakhstan who he gets people to be like, you're doing this, and he gets them to do that almost like. And I explain this to boxers all the time. I'm like, do you think the Jets fucking scrimmage all the time? Like, let's do some breakout drills. Let's do some 2-on-2s or 3-on-2s. Like, there's a reason why we do this. So that this part of the game is structured and it's instinctive. But you know, every gym culture is a bit different. Here's the biggest problem with I think boxing is it is a very poor sport. It is run by a lot of volunteers. It doesn't make a lot of money at a ground level. It is very grassroots. And so I don't think I know of a martial art, and it is technically a martial art, that is more stuck in tradition than the good old boxing. Like, you got Taekwondo has belts, Jiu-Jitsu, you know, karate, like all these, they have standardization. We got nothing. You go in the ring or you're not. Like, do you know what the whole premise of like getting a belt in Taekwondo is? Knowing the moves to do offensive and defensive tactics.
Mm-hmm.
What a brilliant scheme. Why don't we have that? Right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I never really thought about that before. But yeah, it does make a lot of sense. But yeah, it just seems like such an obvious thing to me. Like, I feel like it'd be a sport because you'd face so much like physical adversity, like right in your face, that I feel like you'd want certain skills that were just automatic, that have been practiced so many times that you don't have to think about them. Like you said, they're reactionary, but you know that, you know, you can throw these punches and do these things just based on your training, no matter if, you know what I mean? Because you almost want to have that skill set, because, you know, like the Tyson thing is like, oh, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face, right? And like, that would be the perfect example of like, you get punched in the face, you still want to be able to execute that plan, right? So you think that you'd want that training to be just like so locked in that even though you get punched in the face, man, you can still execute that at a high level. You fall back to the level of your training in a time of adversity, and your training just has you programmed to just, you know what I mean? Like, execute still at a high level, right?
100%. And that's, I think it might be more an American or North American style, because boxing is very, you know, traditional and stuff. And you look at the other martial arts, it didn't really originate here. And so they had probably more systems involved, but it's super important. That's what I preach to all of my athletes, anyone that I work with, is I just say that I need you to understand that your instincts suck right now, and we're going to make your instincts better. And yeah, it's, you know, it's reps and reps. And how much you got left there?
Oh, I'm still good. I still got a couple bottles, but
yeah.
Just someone asked what we were drinking.
So I went cheap. I go for the cheap Canadian, and it's funny because I never used to like Canadian until you got me on small bat, or I never tried it really. It was a Weiser's guy, that kind of stuff, and then I got on Canadian Club from the small batch, and even their cheap stuff. And I'm a cheap guy, so it works. Does the job.
It does it, yeah.
But yeah, no, I think the it's catching up. I'm not saying all gyms are like this. I think our gym's doing a great job of creating this. Every time I look at a drill, most drills, not all drills, but a lot of drills, I'm like, how is this like a hockey drill? How is this like a football drill? How can we create a routine behavior so that they don't hesitate to do what they need to do?
Right.
And I think way too often it's scrap. The term open sparring in and of itself is such a problem because it's legitimately a scrimmage. Like you guys never had a football practice that was a scrimmage, right? Like hockey players at a professional level never scrimmage each other. The closest you'll see is a 3-on-3 or a 4-on-4. You in a zone, like you will not see a scrimmage at a professional level. Well, we should learn from that, right? And I'm not saying, again, I'll go back to like there's hand pads, there's other techniques and drills that you do, but it is very important. And just to come back to the whole conversation around behavior, I hope people really look at that. I hope people can conceive that. You know what I mean? Like conceive how hard that is for a human to develop an instinct when like training for boxing. Okay. Like think about the idea of a human trying to hit you in the face. And what I always explain to people is that you getting hit in the face from, and I hate to go down this path, but evolutionary stance, your brain is wired to think that someone hitting your head, because it's your nervous system, is a life or death attack, or possibly could be, right?
Yeah,
and the easy example I give people is like, if someone was trying to punch you in the arm a bunch, would you panic?
right.
No. The leg? No. Stomach? Maybe. Vital organs, right? Head? Okay, yeah. And what's really interesting is when people, when you look at the calories burned within sparring, it's not a lot. You actually don't burn a lot of calories. And I looked at what they like measured, and I'm assuming it was measured. Sparring, although your heart rate is fucking jacked up, it's all fucking adrenaline. It's all just someone going after your nervous system because you think someone's trying to kill you. And I'm like,
Fight or flight type. Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
And like think about, like, I could run you through a HIIT workout. I could put you on the heavy bag, make you do burpees, do the prowler, anything I've done with focus. And you'd be like, that was tough. But if I put you toe to toe with someone near your size and you're sparring for 10 minutes, you'd be like, that was the most fucking intense thing I've ever done.
For sure.
And it would be like 10 minutes of it. But you would not burn nearly as many calories within that 10 minutes that you would with anything else.
Yeah.
And it has everything to do with the fight or flight. And so you just got to appreciate that neurological connection can be altered. And I think there is something to, like, when I started to implement this whole structure of getting individuals comfortable with that,
Right.
what I would see people who would normally be running away from the boxing gym when they get hit to being excellent boxers and great boxing coaches, because we got them comfortable with a very uncomfortable scenario from reps and reps and reps.
Right.
And I think my whole message of that was really about put in your reps that don't feel like anything, but they are something. Put in your reps that you don't want to do, because the reps that you don't want to do are the most impactful, right? It's literally like we had talked about this with hypertrophy. It's reps to failure. It's the stress of the load that causes the resistance adaptation. And I think that's really something for, I was talking about the voice of resistance. I'm talking about just my own personal evolution. And I think if people could imagine that, if you could imagine that that's where your behavior change comes from. And I will also come back to your discussion that you already said. The people who put in those reps really wanted to do it, even if they hated it.
Right.
You can't fake will too well, right? So I think the why has to be so potent. And you can't train people on why. You can't train people on why do you want to do what you want to do? Why do you want to change who you are? Because that has to be so powerful.
Yeah, that's not something that's going to come from an external source. Like, you can kind of maybe help them discover it, but obviously at the end of the day, everyone only succeeds when they come to the realization that they are the answer to all their own problems, right? So like you had mentioned earlier, when you were wanting someone to come and whatever for your nutrition stuff, and then you're like, I realized that person was me, But yeah, I've had a few good. I had one great psych professor in my undergrad that I think I might have told you this before, but he had told me he's been all over the world, and he's like treated all sorts of different people and stuff, and people will call him in for certain things because he's had like a high level of success, and they think that he's got some sort of like special way of doing stuff. And he told us, he's like, the only way anyone made any progress in any of my psychological counseling, he's like, was just the exact moment that they realized that they were the answer to all their own problems. And he's like, my whole job was just to help get them there, And now doing my graduate degree in the middle of my master's right now, I had another great prof who I enjoyed immensely in one of the first courses that I took back in the beginning of the year. And she basically had the same message, but she just worded it as that like people are the experts on their own lives, right? So she was like, my whole mission is just to be like, hey, I don't know what you should do. You know what I mean? But she's like, it's your life. Like, you're the expert on your own life. You know what I mean? But I'll help you get there, and I'll support you on it and everything like that. But she's like, I don't know what you should do, because people always want to ask, well, what should I do? What should I, And she was like, I don't know, you're the expert, right? So I figured if I got two of my profs that I really respected a lot, that kind of pointed me in that direction, there's got to be some truth behind it, They've both been very successful in their counseling careers or whatever. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing, right? Like, just at the end of the day, like you're not going to be able to provide that for the person, right? Like, it's going to happen for them when they decide they want to do it. And part of that is probably them realizing that they are the answer to their, like you were talking about earlier, you were waiting for someone to come and tell you, and then you realize that person was you,
That's a beautiful statement, beautiful sentiment. I think that took me a long time to recognize that I wasn't supposed to be the motivator, that I wasn't supposed to be the trigger. And, I would say more so my parents. I've talked to you about that before. And then even more recently, I had this, like, just recognizing clients that aren't good for me. And just like, if you're not motivated, don't work with me. Like, if you're not going to put in the work, like, I'll show you the whole road. It 100% is your choice to do it. And I still have clients like that to this day, where like I'm trying to look at them, and I had, through Gavin, he had introduced me to a really good business or mentorship coach, and he had said, rate your clients, like recognize you got A's, B's, C's, and D's and F's, and like if they're not an A or a B, like you're not with the right person, and they're bringing down your average. And it's not even so much that they're a bad person, but you're certainly not the right coach for them. And maybe they need the coach that can communicate that motivation the right way. Maybe they need the coach that can meet them with that right type of workout or nutrition program. Maybe they need someone to talk to them in a different way. But I do love that whole conversation that you are the person that has to determine this. It is, we go back to the whole, it is your choice. It is your own power. And it took a huge stress off me. And I have to keep learning this. I have to learn this again and again, because there's maybe a cultural concept around trainers being very motivating, and yeah, certainly are for the right people, for the right person, the people who listen to you, right? And it becomes quite the challenge when someone entrusts you and invests in you and you want to be there for them, but you don't have the right message that they expect to hear, right? So that becomes a real challenge. But I've let that, like, if it's working for some people to work with me when they do what I want to do and I want them to do, I'm like, and I'm motivating them still, and other doesn't. And then I recognize, I'm like, okay, then it's not that, there's a problem with this person, but I'm not the right fit for you. And you should find someone that can bring that best out of you. But,
Right.
you still have to come to this realization that, every person needs to come to a realization that the power is within themselves. I heard Jason Brooks say the words very simple, and so he's a performance psychologist, and he had told me, I asked him about what should I research and all this stuff, and he said anything in self-limiting beliefs. And I never even just heard that term really much up to that point. And he just said the word self-limiting beliefs, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm living that all the time. I'm living this mindset of, where am I limiting myself? Like, you are your own limitation. We talked about this about like hypertrophy and training. Is like, we talked about self-limitation right off the bat. You have to recognize where you're limiting yourself. Like, stop blaming the external world as much as you can. And even if, like, I'll take ownership around my own limitation. My range of motion in my shoulders is my own limitation, based on the fact that I don't do enough mobility work. Like, I am my own limitation. I fucking own that. Right. And that's okay. I mean, it's okay until my shoulder gets fucked up, and it's been good. I'll just say I've been good. I've been working the range of motion progressively. I've been working against my own limitation, but I own that. And I think it's owning your own limitation is a very important thing. But yeah, I think it's really fascinating too, when you talk, because you're getting into the psychology spectrum of things. And, I thought training was really interesting. And I thought nutrition was fascinating. And now psychology is fucking terrifying. Like, it's like, it is, I mean, I could be wrong about this, but I think it's accurate, relatively accurate to say it is the most challenging biological science to really think we know anything about. Because, like psychology, sociology, any of that stuff is like, even if you have a therapist, doesn't matter. They're still just there hoping you're going to figure it out. Right. Because
100%.
Because we know so little about psychology and neurological behavior, because the brain is so fascinating, how smart it is and how uncontrollable it is, especially when you talk about conscious mind, subconscious mind, and, you talk about environmental, talk about genetic, like fuck ton of shit you can't control. And it dictates everything.
Yes. Yeah. It's I mean, it's like you said, like, as expansive as you think that the exercise part is and the nutrition part is, the psychological part would be even more expansive, right? But super important, obviously, right? It's I see it becoming, what's funny, I actually see it becoming obviously, this is not new. A lot of people see it becoming more and more kind of prevalent and popular, and being kind of brought into the mainstream a lot more and stuff. But I feel like it will be the next kind of big wave on how, remember how like training exploded with the invention of social media, and all of a sudden everyone wanted to be a trainer, or everyone was a trainer, or some sort of influencer, fitness influencer, this or that or whatever. And there was a lot of good with that and a lot of bad with that, just like anything in life or whatever. But I feel the next kind of explosion through social media and stuff in the next industry will be with the kind of self-help, mental performance, psychological, therapeutic type of whatever in that field or whatever. I feel you're going to it's going to explode in the same way as the fitness thing did, where you're going to see everyone and their dog on social media, kind of, with their own take on it and their own kind of pushing their own agenda and their own stuff on it. It'll kind of be the next big thing on there, I think. But which I'm not saying is not a bad thing. Like I said, there's plenty of positives that came with fitness exploding on social media, right? Plenty of positives, but obviously, like I said, with some negatives as well. And it'll be the same with this, with the whole mental health and wellness or psychology aspect of things, or therapy, or whatever, however you want to categorize it, but mindfulness, or, but I feel like that one will be the next one to really explode. It's gaining a lot of steam already, but it will really explode, I think, in the next couple of years, and see plenty of positives for it, but you'll also see a bunch of negatives too, with similar to the fitness industry, where you got people pushing certain extremes and stuff like that. You'll have people pushing certain extremes or absolutes, like we talked about earlier in this, on how you should think or how you should mentally prepare for things, or how you should, and because they'll be kind of trying to sell you something or kind of push in a certain direction. But it's a big one, and like you said, it's expansive, and for as much as you know about it, obviously you have people in it that you can specialize in the field now, and you can be, you got doctors in the field and all that stuff, obviously. So you have people that have amassed like a large wealth of knowledge, and but in comparison on what potentially is out there to learn about the psychology and how we think and why we think certain ways, like you said, we're just kind of scratching the surface, right?
Yeah, I like how you put that into context. This is the new wave. This is the new form of health, and it's going to have both pros and cons to it. Same idea with nutrition and fitness, and the benefits. I'm really curious to see what the benefits will be. Like, we're starting to, like you say, scratch the surface of behavior change. We're starting to appreciate what it is to be mindful, to appreciate our emotions, to handle our emotions. But it's all still so new to every single, it doesn't matter how many studies we do. When you look at the spectrum of training, you look at the spectrum of eating, personality spectrum is like so fucking far down that rabbit hole that it's hard to comprehend. So it'll be really, really fascinating we're going to pull out the shirts here. Yeah.
But the muscle shirts being weird. I'm like, oh man, it's matching. It's
They don't even know. I saw that. Yeah, I like that. Now I got a title or a good photo for saving it. But no, it's super fascinating, and I love that you're in that realm. I'm thinking about going down that rabbit hole down the road, because as I got more and more into these things, that was my development. It was like, training so awesome, so fascinating. I want to know everything about it, and there's still more to know. And I still, but like, then when I got into nutrition, I'm like, wow, I'm just so obsessed with food. I got to know more about it, and so I tried to find more about it. And then I was like, wait a minute, it's like my mental choices. It's like literally. Okay, I appreciate that. That's very nice. Okay, but. So then when I got into that, and I appreciated that it was all psychology, and I'm like, oh man, that's a whole nother rabbit hole. And that's a terrifying rabbit hole. It's like an unknown one. It's like where people are barely trying to captivate what the science even says. So, but I do want to come back to one thought. So I talked a little bit about what I learned in the last year. So for me, it was like metabolism, and that was probably one of my biggest take homes, and how I can help my clients with diet plans and stuff like that. There's a few others, but strength training consistently and trying to mobilize my shoulders and all that stuff. I would love to know yours, because I want to know what in 2021, what were a couple of your big take homes where you're like, yeah, that was a big one for me. What were some big ones for you?
Like in, I will fill it up. You're gonna have to go see Mama. Yeah. Tablet, okay. Thanks. Sorry. So in the context of like training, you mean like just strictly?
Well, what anything like, last year, I mean, for me, those were the main things that I took home, but it could be training, it could be life, it could be anything. What do you feel like you looked back and you're like, wow, I learned a lot from that in 2021? I don't know. I mean, man, going back to the beginning part, when we were talking a lot about hypertrophy, I feel I've learned a lot in that field. Even just obvious stuff, simple stuff, right? Like, we talked about Paul Carter and, kind of learning from some of his stuff. He's kind of gotten me to kind of pay attention a little more. He's talked about, he's really big on muscle, like origin, insertions, which way the direction the muscle fibers are running, stuff like that. So I never really, some of that information, but you sometimes forget to apply it when you kind of constructively kind of like break down an exercise, right? You think to yourself, like, is this exercise maybe efficient or, going to be our best choice for what we're trying to accomplish, right? And so I feel like there's a lot in that kind of area that I spend a lot of time in over the last year or whatever, right? Kind of learning. Which included a bunch of like eye-opening moments, right? Like, I don't know if you're, when you look at the work that he's done there with just what actually constitutes true lat work, right? And you take the lat pull down, which everyone refers to the lat pull down, and you realize in the conventional method with the kind of slightly wider overhand grip that it's actually more teres than it is lats. And that if you actually want to work the lats, you're going to be in a narrower neutral grip position with limited thoracic extension. Then you break that down, and you're like, wow, like everyone that does quote unquote lat pull downs, no one's really, using their lats as the primary focus, their primary mover, right? And you think about how long you've coached lat pull downs as a lat exercise, and you've programmed them in workouts after workouts for people. And for years and years, you've done them yourself, you've done them with clients and stuff like that. It almost makes you feel like a little foolish to kind of, ignore some kind of basic anatomy of, like I said, the origin insertion of the lat muscle and the way the muscle fibers run and how you line up the line of pull and stuff like that to make it most efficient. And you're just like, you realize that there's probably a bunch of stuff out there that you've been doing that you've just always done because everyone's always done it that way. And you were taught that way, and no one's ever really
questioned it or looked deeper into it, or even actually checked to see if that was the most efficient way to work. You know what I mean? So I had a few kind of moments like that this year where it completely changed, so now my whole perception of a lat pull down looks completely different than it did a year ago. Right. And I'm like 20 years into working in gyms, you know what I mean? And you still have a moment like that where you're like, oh, wait a second, like those lat pull downs aren't actually really lats, like it's almost seems so ridiculous that that kind of level of oversight could exist. Like I said, it almost makes you feel a little foolish, but it's good to be humbled every once in a while, and you just kind of just kind of keep learning, right? But that was a big one for me. Like there was it made me definitely reevaluate some certain movements and how they were done and what I thought that they were accomplishing, especially, keeping with the theme when we were talking about the hypertrophy stuff. That was huge for me, right? Like all of a sudden just thinking like, okay, like, is this a great hypertrophy exercise? If it is, like, is this a great way to do it? Like, the angle that I've been doing it at actually lines up really poorly, when you're thinking certain movements, and it just kind of makes you think, and you're just like, oh, that actually doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, and you try it out and, you're like, I think actually this line of pull, like lining up the line of pull with the direction of the muscle fibers for hypertrophy work actually makes a lot of sense. Right. And so it's just, that was a big one for me, man, because there's a whole bunch of stuff there that I just feel like I always just did and just never really questioned, right? And I don't think they're necessarily poor exercises, like someone doing a traditional lat pull down, it's not a bad exercise at all. It still has use and it still has function within a lot of different training programs and for a lot of different training goals. But, if you're thinking about, just trying to get the most out of your lat training from a hypertrophy standpoint, is there a better way to do a pull down? Probably, and that was like such a simple, basic movement, right? So that was really interesting, but I was excited, right? Because anytime something like that comes across, like instead of like, it actually kind of excites me a little bit because I'm like, oh shit, something new. You know what I mean? Like I'm learning, I'm getting better. This is interesting, right? And then I feel like a lot of my other moments this year all came obviously just, being back in school. So, man, you sit there and you're in class. And like I said, I've luckily had like amazing profs so far that have been like awesome, like beyond my expectation of the profs, what I thought I would have like in the master's program, my experience with university in the undergrad was much more that the profs really couldn't give a shit about you. You know what I mean? They didn't really, I don't know, they were probably there doing their own research, and part of the thing was they just had to teach us class, and they would get their TA to come in and like throw something on the projector or whatever for you to watch, and they would, you know what I mean? Like it was just completely different, right? That was my experience in my undergrad. So I kind of had that in my mind going into the master's. I went in the master's program, and the profs that I've had are so good and so involved. It just makes like learning super interesting and fun again. And you feel like, you know what I mean? Like you're just like, wow, what an opportunity to get better and learn. So, I mean, a whole bunch of my kind of moments have been through that, where like every day in class, there's like a light bulb going off in your head, you're making these connections to being like, oh yeah, like I think I kind of read about this before. Oh, that's interesting. Like I've noticed this before in working with people, but I just kind of noticed it through a very non-scientific, like just kind of like organic way of just like having conversations with people. But now they've come and like brought some actual like research and science behind it, and like given it you like proper terms and names and stuff to use with maybe some stuff you've noticed in relationships with people, right? And they've kind of, and then all of a sudden the light bulb goes off and you're like, that's what that's called. Like I've noticed that before. I've had that with people. I've had that You know what I mean? And they kind of come in, and they've been great, man. Like the profs have been like unreal, and shared a lot of their experiences and stuff like that, right? So I can't even, like, specific examples is like tough, because it literally feels like excuse me, like I've been like learning new stuff almost on a daily basis. That's all been like super interesting, right? But all lying in the field of like mental health and wellness, and all in counseling psychology, right? That's what the program is. So
That sounds amazing. I super jealous of that, because when you talked about profs that don't give a fuck, and you talk about teachers that just put shit on a fucking overhead, I like that describes a lot of my education. I honestly can't even count how many times I had professors that I couldn't understand the words that they were coming out of their mouth, and it was just because like they just weren't good professors. They weren't good at public speaking. They weren't good at like, and sometimes they didn't come from here. And so and there was still their job to talk. And so like, Ray, and he's a professor, and I talk to him about this all the time. Like, how is there not one fucking class that they have to take? How is there not one? Give them one, and maybe rate them once in a while and make it fucking matter. But the ironic thing is, one of the classes that I had in nutrition that was one of the worst profs I ever had, was considered a rock star in nutrition research. So because of his research capability, he was like third, fourth year like teaching, and I'm like, I'm not learning anything from you. And even his fucking notes, that this is not that long ago, he could have posted this shit. He could have put it on, PowerPoint existed, and this was like a Word documentary that was not organized. Like, right. Even when we try to do we try to do these assignments, like what section is this in? Because he has like there was no organization, there was no flow. If a prof can't teach, at least base it off a textbook, because I'll read the textbook. And if you don't go off a textbook, then I'm fucked. And to hear that feedback, that you had that kind of experience with profs, is super powerful. And I think that's incredible. Wow. I think that's really cool. I think the major thing is to have post-secondary, like teachers trying to teach you with passion is so important. Now, I can understand why not all will be that way in education. Fundamentals of training should be there, in my opinion. I still don't understand how that can't be, but I think that's really cool. I think that's awesome. So how far are you from your end of your education in that for your master's? How many classes you take this year? How much more you got left?
Oh man, I still got a year and a half to go.
Well, it's a master's, so that's something real.
I'm in the middle of one, but how I was able to structure it is I've only been like, I take one course at a time. But I go to school 12 months a year. So that still allows me to get it done. And that allowed me to get the whole thing done in like 2.5 years. Like 2 years of like formal like education, and then 30 weeks of like practicum work, like working in the field. So I'm on my third course right now out of many. So it's new into it, but like I said, it's, you use the word teacher, and I think that's a difference. So I felt in my undergrad like I had professors. So far in my master's, I felt like I've had teachers, which I feel is a big difference. Even though they, I would address them as professor, they're all doctors in the field, but it's amazing, like their but they're teachers, right? They've been teaching me, like I've been learning from them. And more importantly for myself, I've been learning from their personal experiences working in the field, which I feel is obviously the most valuable knowledge you could kind of acquire from someone else, right? The textbook exists. I have the textbook. So whether they tell me to read chapters 1 through 5, or I read chapters 1 through 5 on my own, like that's going to happen. There's not a lot of teaching that happens in there, right? But once I've read chapters 1 through 5, them then giving me their personal experiences on those topics, then that's what like I enjoy and what I respond well to. And that's what helps me like make all those connections, right? And I'm like, okay, now I'm learning something, right? I have the, you know, the formal, the structured written like learning here on the textbook. And now I just got like, you know, a doctor's personal experience who's worked in the field in counseling psychology for the last 20 years. And they've given me, you know, 10 different real life examples that applies to what I just read. And then I'm able to ask them questions on it, and they actually interact back with me, and we have conversations about it. I'm like, now I feel like I'm actually acquiring knowledge and I'm learning, right? So they're teaching me, right? Which is amazing. Like I said, as strange as it sounds, it's more than I expected, just based on my previous experience with post-secondary education, right? So man, it's been great. And I'm happy they do it that way, because obviously after I'm done school, you will be professionally licensed to work with people on their mental health. And that's obviously something I feel is extremely important, and that I wouldn't take that responsibility lightly. You know, if I had the opportunity to work with someone on their mental health, I want to make sure that I'm qualified to do it, and that I'm ready to do it. You know what I mean? So I appreciate how this program has been put together so far, because I actually do feel like I am learning, and I'm learning skills and acquiring knowledge that will be usable, you know what I mean, and make me good at what I want to do after with it, right? So yeah, so it's good. But I would say that that's been my biggest thing of development over this last year, right? Obviously that's kind of taken over. You know, I did go get my CSCS too.
Yeah.
I went and wrote it back in June, maybe. Yeah, I finally made an appointment and went and wrote it. So I thought that was kind of funny to finally get it. You know,
Yeah.
whatever, 15 years later.
That's awesome. I think everything you're doing is incredible, because I still remember working with you at the time that you were still trying to finish your degree, and I think it's such an important story. It's an important part of your story, in that you knew that you didn't leave your education appropriately, and you transitioned your degree into something tangible, and you did it in the midst of managing a very busy gym, a very successful gym, and having a family. And that's so many so many full-time jobs at once, and then still doing that. And then on top of that, saying I'm not done. I think that's very inspiring. I think that's an incredible story. I think that's awesome. And to see where you're going with it is amazing stuff. And I hope to end in this same rabbit hole of the psychology stuff. I still don't know where I'm going with my stuff. I got to see where the business itself with this online realm, it's a whole different beast, but I hope to end up there. My thought is that life is more about thoughts at the end, is that the older I get, it's more about thinking, it's less about doing. And I think that, or being very efficient with the doing. And I just in general want to be more about what I can pass on in terms of the mental aspect. And so That's why I want to go down the same rabbit hole you're on down the road. And I think it's great. I think that's amazing that you're doing that. And I'm really excited to see where it takes you, and excited to see the conversations that we get to have from that down the road. So I have just a couple things here that I want to finish up this whole I think it's been, if this is recording appropriately, a great podcast and a great episode. So one question that did come in, there was some hilarious questions that came in from other people. Chris had said Rich Gerard, and he's a pretty cool guy. So, but one of the other questions was, what are the thoughts on barefoot or shoe wearing during training? And I think that's a really legit question. And then after that, I want to talk about New Year's resolutions for us. But what is your thoughts on this? So, because I personally, I'll just tell you mine real quick.
Yeah.
I used to wear shoes a fair bit, and I got more into the barefoot stuff. Not always, but more main lift oriented. So if I'm main lift, you always wear Converse. And so I didn't. I had like running shoes, some training, cross trainer shoes, but more barefoot I got, the better I felt in powerlifting, like deadlift, squat, bench, deadlift and squat mainly. But as soon as I went into lunging or anything that was more ambulation and more like, you had stability issues. Yeah. That's where I would lean into just shoes. But my girl actually got me these Notorious lifting shoes, and I wear those. Those are great. I do agree that people should understand what their foot does for their lifts. But what's your premise on that? I'm curious.
So I think there is some truth and some value in it. I obviously do feel that, just a couple things right off the top of my head. Obviously, if you are barefoot or in something with a more minimalistic sole, there's less of a dampening there of when you go to put force into the ground, you being able to draw force out of the ground, right? It's not having to travel through like 1.5 inches of foam. So the response there is more immediate, which I think can be valuable. The stability, obviously it can help with when we kind of break up the areas of our athletes into areas that we want mobility. We look at shoulders, thoracic spine, hips, and ankles. And we feel that if we move well in those 4 areas, then that should provide like a foundational level for the athletes to move well in anything they do in the gym or their sport. So obviously having more of those minimalistic shoes also helps with, stressing, like working more ankle mobility into some of the movements and stuff, because they don't have such a high, like spongy heel lift on them. There's quite a bit of information there about there just on the how narrow the toe box is on a lot of regular kind of running shoes, and the value of being able to have the toes spread out a little more, how the foot is kind of naturally designed to be, to give us more stability and force production through the foot, having our toe box a little bit wider, being able to spread out and not be kind of crammed in by the shoe. So a bunch of things like that. So if people are into it, I'm fully supportive of it. I use some of it myself in my own training. I will say though, like anything, it has kind of become one of those things almost where I think sometimes people are maybe focusing on it a little too much now. No different than foam rolling or when stuff like that comes in, right? It came in, it was introduced, there's truth in it, there's value in it. But then now people are at the same time, I'm like, hey, don't get me wrong. If you want to wear your Nike cross trainers, or you want to wear your Chuck Taylors, or you want to wear your Vibram 5-finger toe shoes or whatever, at the end of the day, the person that's going to see the most benefit is the person that works out the most consistently with the highest amount of intensity and does all the other things right. I don't think that, it's going to really make or break their pro, you know what I mean? I wouldn't be like, oh man, I was working with this hockey guy forever. He totally would have made the NHL, but he just wouldn't wear a minimalistic enough shoe. He just really liked his Nike cross trainers, and it really held him back. He didn't make the show because he wouldn't wear the right shoes. You know what I mean? Where it's almost kind of become that way for some people, where again, people love to operate in extremes and have agendas and being absolutes, where people are no, you shouldn't wear, like, you should be barefoot in the gym all the time. I'm just like, hey man, if you enjoy it and you feel better in it, let's do it. If you like wearing your Asics or Adidas or Reeboks or Nikes in the gym and they're a cross trainer or running style shoe, you feel comfortable in them, you like them, you know, for the majority of movements and stuff like that, like, let's wear those. We're going to be okay. You know what I mean? Like, there's some obviously specific examples of someone's like competing to be like an Olympic lifter or whatever. Obviously, they're going to wear Olympic weightlifting shoes. Or they're a power lifter, they're going to wear Olympic weightlifting shoes. You know what I mean? Because there maybe be some distinct advantages in there, and having a little bit of higher heel lift, being able to open up their hips a little more, get a little better depth, or have that like solid wood platform to push into. But like for the average person training, and even the average athlete training, even the professional athlete training, the like tiny little bit of percent that is going to maybe make like a little bit of it. You know what I mean? Like, it's nothing that I would try to like force on somebody. You know what I mean? So I don't know. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I do think there's value in it. Like anything, if people want to try it, I'll gladly support it and you know, give them suggestions, and we'll work through it. And we have some guys in the gym in our pro group that when it comes to trap bar deadlifts and stuff like that, they'll kick their shoes off and they'll just do it barefoot or in their socks or whatever, and they enjoy that. Some guys keep their shoes on. I haven't seen a big enough difference to lead me to believe that I should like implement like a standard being like, no, you have to 100% wear this type of, you know what I mean? So.
I love that description of like, oh man, I thought this guy's going to make the NHL, but he wore Nikes. You know, I just like, that's a hilarious description, and you know, I fully agree. I'm biased to my own preference of just recognizing the biofeedback that I would get in my power lifts, but I would also say. Feet are a funny thing because there is a lot we take for granted there in terms of like, I had heard someone, I think it was Chris Duffin, who had said like, well, what if you wore mitts every day? Like, you know, he actually said boxing gloves. So I think that's a bit of an exaggeration. And yeah, that would be a detriment to your biofeedback, right? Like, I wouldn't feel things as well. And that, you know, gloves during working out is a whole nother discussion, but, you know, both of us would probably believe you should have grip strength, but it's still not the same, but it's similar in terms of biofeedback. Now, how important is it? Well, the workout's important. You know, I'm going to say the squat, hinge, push, pull are important. And I do want them to have ankle mobility and all that stuff. We can address that separate if that's what's going to take for them to do it, right? Like, do some ankle mobility work. Wear your fucking runners if you need to do whatever deadlifts you're going to do. And yeah, I wish you would wear some flatter feet shoes sometimes, but I'm not going to say that's going to make a break. Yeah, it's not going to make a break yet. I think showing up is more important. I think there's an advantage to the big lifts for the squat in the deadlift. I think there's an advantage. I think there could be and this is somewhat found in the research, there's a disadvantage if you don't train into it. That's the danger, is if people say, oh, I got to go like, you know, barefoot, or I got to go Vibrams, like I have to. You don't, or if you decide, and hey, I've been on this bandwagon of like, what could I get out of my feet if I demand more out of them? Well, if you're going to demand more out of them, you better train into this demand. It's no different than if I took my gloves off. I would need to get used to that surface and grabbing. And so you don't start with concrete. You start with like and I noticed a difference in my behavior in my running. You better believe I still wear runners when I run on concrete. You better believe that I have, this is always my thing, is I have lifting shoes, I have cross trainers for more athleticism and change of direction in sprinting, and I have longer distance running shoes. And ideally, I would narrow the margin on that. But you also got to look at this where you are, where your anatomy is. We talked about this before, saying like you evolve to where you're at, and then with your vigilance, you understand what you have within your capacity. So I thought it was a really interesting question. I think it's a challenging one for some because this will go into the absolutes of you have to wear the barefoot, you have to go barefoot, and you don't got to do shit. You don't even have to work out, but it could be more advantageous based on your goal, depending on your goal, right? What you're doing. Yeah. So I want to get that question because that was one of the few sincere questions I got from Instagram. And the other thing I wanted to ask you was, what is 2022 going to be for you? What is, you said psychology. What other big things are you trying to work towards?
Oh, you know what? I don't know. That's a good question. I feel like I'm not really a big, I don't have any formal resolutions, that I really I don't really lay out any goals at the beginning of the year where I specifically write something down and whatever. I do like to look back on the year at the end and see what I had accomplished. And I feel like for a long time running now, there's always been at least, something in my life, each year that's been something kind of I feel special, where whether if it was buying a house or getting married, or each year that we had the kids, or, getting the position that I have at work, or, going back to school, finishing school, upgrading school, getting accepted in the master, you know what I mean? Now being in school. So I feel like there's always certain things that I just always want to make sure that I'm moving forward all the time, right? Even if I feel like I'm not, even if I don't know if it's the right direction yet or not, I just feel like I want to be moving, because I won't know if it's the right direction until I start moving, right? If not, then, I'll just be standing I don't want to come around to next year at this time and I feel like I'm in the exact same place that I was, and but to be honest, like I said, I never really write out any. Obviously this year, I'll be in school all year, so that'll be a big thing for me to get another year of this master's under my belt, and at this time next year I'll be starting my last 15 weeks of formal school, and then I'll be going into my practicum after, right? So I'll be kind of near the end of the kind of classwork of the program, right? So that'll be a big deal. And then I'm never really quite sure what life is going to bring, but I feel there will be big things along the way that but nothing that I've kind of pinpointed where I'm this is a resolution for me, or I have to do this, right? I have a goal of finally, hopefully hitting 400 pounds on the bench this year. I'm creeping up on it. I'm getting the closest that I ever have been. And like I said, I feel like I've been feeling good, feeling healthy, my elbows, my shoulders, my stuff like that. But that's obviously a goal that I feel gets maybe harder every year I get older, right? So I feel like if I'm going to hit it, the sooner the better, right? It's not a goal I'm probably hitting at 50. So now that I'm 40, but I feel like, as far as my lifting goes, that's the only real kind of workout goal that I have for this year. There's always this part of me still, this I don't know, inner meathead part of me, that's still married, that still just loves the bench press and married to the idea of one day bench pressing 400 pounds.
You're trying to hit 400, still meathead, just like myself. I love that goal. And I tell you, my life goal is the 1,500 pound club. I want to hit the 654. So I'm playing long game. I don't expect to hit any new 100 pounds this year. So I'm hoping when I'm near your age is right around where I'll hit it. What do you think your total is right now?
Here's a question for you. You're 15, when you hit your 1500, do you want to be able to do all those at the same time, or you just want to hit a lifetime 1500?
I want to hit them all at the same time.
Yeah, that is extremely difficult, but it's awesome. Very worthy goal.
Well, so the thing that's funny though is they're not the exact same right now. I think bench and squat are behind my sumo. My sumo is like my actual conventional deadlift are very associated with like just like they're very close to where my squat and my bench is 100 pounds up. But I recently discovered my sumo squat is just, wow, that's so much easier. It's lower to the ground, closer to my body. Like that'll be like, I'll hit 600 on that first for sure. But yeah, that is my goal. Like, but like, and also not to obsess over the big three, because I still have powerlifting and athletic goals. So I'm not saying that it's like, oh, it'd be easy and I just do the squat, bench and deadlift and I would get it, but it would be way faster. Like I'm not going to commit to just powerlifting. I want to keep my boxing athleticism. I want to keep my hypertrophy, but I still want to stay lean. So, you know, I'm going to be kind of steadily working the 5-3-1 model throughout the year. And yeah, I'll just tell you my resolution, and I'm similar. I'm not like this year is I have to resolve things on Jan 1. I'm very similar to yourself. But what I will say is I don't mind dedicating an idea to the year. And and it's like certainly like everything I've learned already with metabolism, strength training, those will all carry over. But I do like carrying over a thought and just like a term for, and I'm not kidding, I say a word and try to use that word more often for my thought process. And for me, for a couple of years in a row, I'm not lying, it was 2 years in a row, was the word listen, because I talk too much. Like I legit was actually trying to be more of an attentive listener, and I still am to this day. And I would say for me now, it's probably learn. If I were to just say on this spot, like what's come to mind, what I've experienced, despite being, you know, as far as I am in the realm of fitness and nutrition is, and honestly, business, I'd say more than everything is be someone who's learning, you know, be that word and have it remind you of that. And so for me, like learning, like honestly, it's more than anything business of this fitness industry and being willing to learn. Being willing to learn is a whole different ballgame, right? So that's my word of 2022, and we'll see where it takes me. But you know, I
do like that. I like that idea of just having a word. It makes it very simple, very to the point. Just gives you kind of like a little bit of a guiding kind of thing, right? In any situation that you're in or in whatever, you're just like, all right, am I learning? Okay, we're good, you know?
Yeah, it's simple enough, and it doesn't mean that you're going to succeed at it. It's like, because like I just said, I used listen 2 years in a row, and I still need to listen more, but I think I listen way more than I ever have. Right. And the one thing that I really push against is people who push against resolutions. Right. There's fucking nothing wrong with people asking for behavior change. And you know, we naturally think, even though my birthday is in July and this is halfway through a year, I am going to naturally think it's culturally, we all think it's brand new, it's fresh, it's a new year. Adopt that. There's nothing wrong with that. And even though this is something I thought of just the other day, I'm pulling out my calculator on this because I said 9 out of 10 people don't lose weight. 9 out of 10 people don't succeed in the resolutions. Yeah. But if there are 30 million people, probably more than 30 million people in Canada, times 0.1, that is 3 million people that change their lives this year.
Yeah.
There's nothing fucking wrong with that. I don't care if 9 out of 10 people didn't. If
Right.
3 million people did something different, that's fucking cool. And I'm like I say, I'm very against people who are against resolutions, because the people who are trying to resolve things, I don't care if it takes them 10 times to do it. Someone's going to get it done. And I think that's admirable. I don't care if it happens on Jan 1st. I don't care if it happens in the middle of the year, quarter through the year. It's people who are willing to do behavior change are the only people who are going to be able to solve it. And I look at, like, you know, some people who were like, oh yeah, well, they always do these diets. They always try these things. They're fucking trying, you know, they're trying to do, and it's not easy. I don't care if it takes them 100 attempts, 101 attempts. One of them will make it. Better than none. Better than staying in the fucking bleachers and saying, oh man, they should have done this.
Yeah. No, I agree 100%. Yeah. Yeah. Just support them.
Yeah.
But, you know, that saying there that action offends the inactive, right? So the people that aren't trying anything or whatever get all offended for some reason when people try stuff, right? And I think it's just their own kind of self-reflection where they see someone out there actively that took the steps to try to get better, and it offends them in some sort of way that they've taken action, and that person's taken action and they haven't. And then instead of putting that energy in something positive and taking action themselves, they just decide that it's easier just to try to shit on that person for who knows why. I don't know. You know.
Man, AJ, you are the man of quotes for me. I haven't heard that one. You always pull out these one-liners that I haven't heard of before, and that was a fucking beauty. The action offends the inactive. I love that. That's beautiful.
Yeah,
But you have them. I don't care if they're not yours. You got so many quotes. You've been in this whole industry longer than I have. So you always got all these extra quotes and wisdom for me. So once again, a man of wisdom for me, and I appreciate it. But I'll let you go. I got to go to the bathroom again, and this has been a great, extremely long podcast. Probably be 2 sessions. I appreciate it. We'll do another whiskeys and barbells just like this. I was far more sober this time, but still got into it pretty deep, but it was great. And we'll have to do an in-person session here soon. Thanks so much, AJ, for this. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. Hey, thanks for having me on. Obviously I feel like always a strong connection to everyone that I've had come through Focus. And obviously I had the privilege too of becoming like a good friend of yours too, even outside of our professional relationships. So I don't know, man. I like seeing what you're doing, and I love to support in any way I can. Yeah, it's always good to see.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I think what so many people need to appreciate too, I just want to put this out there. This is how we talk to each other. Yeah. This is not a stage. Like, I'm not sure if anyone realizes this is like when me and Rich talk. Yeah. There's at least 50% of the time me and you doing this, and then we'll talk about something else with Rich. Mm-hmm. But like, this is 100% us. Like, this is how we dive into shit. So I love it. It was a real genuine conversation. We always get into it, and I'm certain we'll have more next time. So I appreciate it so much, AJ. I hope you have a wonderful New Year's, and we'll talk soon, man. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Peace. Thanks again to AJ for that. That was such a fun conversation. Not just because of all the whiskeys, because he's a great guy to talk to, because he's been a great mentor. He's been very open. I can't tell you how many times I would approach him with something and he would say, yeah, let's try it out. And that takes a lot to be that kind of a person. And it's awesome to have a mentor and teacher like that. And it's even better that we got to be friends and we get to continue that relationship for years on end now. As you just saw, that is how we talk to each other. We have whiskeys and we just, shoot the shit talking about the things that we love to talk about. So I hope you learned a lot. You got a little insight of what it's like to have whiskeys with Rhyland and AJ, and be sure there's going to be another one and more. And don't hesitate to give us some feedback. Let us know what else you'd like us to talk about, because that always helps. Otherwise, I'll just throw things back and forth. Leave a review. Share this with a friend that's also passionate about this stuff. And most importantly, do not forget, it's not about the pursuit of happiness. It's about the happiness within the pursuit.